Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review and it's of a Clive Christian. Now, I have reviewed one fragrance from this house on the channel already and it was called Matsuka, I believe. And that fragrance was a fragrance that was originally issued under a brand called the Crown Perfumery. Now, Clive Christian purchased the Crown Perfumery in the late 90s or early 2000s when they became the modern Clive Christian, if you will. There is an amazing breakdown on Clive Christian and the history of the house on a channel called A Nose Knows, and Dana runs that channel. I would urge you to go check that out if you're interested in kind of learning the history of Clive Christian. This fragrance we're going to discuss today is the first from the modern Clive Christian houses, the house that I've reviewed, and I probably have 4 or 5, maybe 6 more Clive Christian reviews that I could do. So you will be hearing more about this this brand on the channel, although I've kind of been avoiding them lately. I think it's time to discuss them at least, because I've talked about a lot of different niche houses, the Amouages, the Creeds, all that good stuff, but it's time we get in on the Clive Christian. So this one's called Number One for Men. Now, this is the older style bottle. The newer style bottle says something a little bit different. It says something along the lines of the masculine perfume of the perfect pair or something like that. And, you know, maybe the corniest cap of all time, but I think the older bottles say the world's most exclusive perfume. And this is a 30 ml. I have basically the set, 3 30 ml bottles, one 1872, one X for Men, which is probably my favorite from this line, and Number One for Men, which they used to just the worst cringe marketing of all time, the world's most expensive perfume. Obviously, it's not the world's most expensive perfume anymore. Spirit of Dubai released a fragrance that was in the millions, or like 1.2 million or something, I can't remember, but it was something ridiculous. And so this isn't even close. This isn't even in the same ballpark anymore as some of the stuff Spirit of Dubai is issuing. And the ones that were sort of, when you look at the Guinness Book of World Records, it's not the fragrance that is expensive. It's this insane bottle that they had it in that used these crazy diamonds and all this stuff. That was where all the money went to. Now, a couple things I have to say. There are some fragrances from the House of Clive Christian that I really like. I don't think it's a completely shite house, but I really hate the way that the house has gone in the last 7 or 8 or 9 years. How many times have I said that lately? Like, I'll give you an example. News just broke a day or two ago that Amouage, that is L'Oreal's purchasing a huge stake in Amouage, a giant stake. They're thinking the stake could be worth billions of dollars, okay? And so anytime L'Oreal touches anything, I feel like it goes to shite. Look what they did to YSL. I mean, they took one of the most, one of the top of the hill fragrance houses, you know, the YSL was right up there as far as I was concerned with the Dior's and the Chanel's back in the day, and now they just ran them directly into the ground. And what's crazy is they just keep buying more. It's like the Borg, you can't get rid of. They just keep expanding. And you know, so I've already thought Amouage crashed and burned. Now it feels like they're really gonna crash and burn once L'Oreal's involved. But hey, I'm happy with my Amouage collection. I'm happy with what I have. And Clive Christian, I guess, I don't know anything about the owners of Clive Christian. I don't know where the ownership stakes went and all that stuff. All I know is in 2016, 17, 18, they started to do 1,000,001 flankers, as if all of a sudden they realized, they woke up and they were like, you know what, we're just going to do flankers for the rest of time. And they started to release stuff like, for example, for 1872, they have 1872 Acacia, 1872 Basil, 1872 Bergamot, 1872 Geranium, 1872 Jasmine, 1872 Leather, 1872 Mandarin, and it's like, what in the holy fuck are you guys doing? Who's gonna pay $500 for a Bergamot flanker of 1872? Like, I mean, I know you're going for the people with so much money that they'll be like, yes, just give me one of everything. Actually, just give me 2 of everything. Fuck it. What's that? 30,000? Here's my black card. That may be the only group of people that could just buy all this dumb shit. The other thing they did with Number One is they released a pure perfume that is now discontinued, by the way. I would love to try the pure perfume of 1872 and Number One. They have a pure perfume of Number One in 1872 and all that stuff. I think that would be cool. And then they started to do these weird I don't know, like Addictive Arts, A Separate Reality. Like, listen to the name. Addictive Arts, A Separate Reality, Manic. Addictive Arts, Separate Reality, Soporific. Addictive Arts, Chasing the Dragon, Euphoric. Addictive Arts, Chasing the Dragon, Hypnotic. Addictive Arts, Jump Up and Kiss Me, Ecstatic. What the hell are they doing? So anyways, they are a house, I think, that has a big identity crisis. Let's put it that way. And then they did the same thing for number one. They have number one, anise. Number one, chamomile. Number one, what else I see? No, all these. Number one, juniper berry. Number one, olibanum. Number one, osmanthus. Number one, violet. Number one, watermint. It's like, what in the fuckity fuck are you doing? But enough about that. So let's talk about the fragrance we're here to discuss, which is Clive Christian for men, number one. Now, there is a number one for women as well. It's not just one number one. There's actually a number one for men and a number one for women. And this entire sort of logo, this entire crest, this entire cap, which is maybe the trendiest cap in all of perfume, but all of this was purchased from the Crown Perfumery Company. And the Crown Perfume company actually had like a royal warrant from, I think, the Queen or at the time to have a particular crown that was close to maybe like the crown of the royal court. I don't know. There was a whole backstory on it. Watch Dana's video. So number one for men is 2001. It's listed as a floral powdery fragrance, and it was created by a perfumer named Patricia Cho, who I have to say, I'm not very high on her work. She did some things for BL Parfum Kunstwerk, which is a house I really like. But she did a fragrance called Carven Pour Homme from 2014, which I'd like to smell, but I never have. And she just kind of hasn't had a very solid, portfolio. I think this is maybe her most popular fragrance, and it's well, we'll talk a little bit about it, but is it worthy of the most expensive perfume in the world moniker? No, I don't think it is at all, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So here's how I have to describe this fragrance, because it's very hard for me to just describe notes in this fragrance. I have to tell you how this fragrance makes me feel. So, well, I will tell you the notes, and then I'll tell you how it makes me feel. So, bell pepper, lime, tarragon, caraway, cardamom, nutmeg, grapefruit, and mandarin orange, according to Parfumo in the top. Lily of the valley, heliotrope, iris, jasmine, ylang ylang, and rose in the heart, with cedar, musk, tonka, vanilla, amber, sandalwood, and vetiver in the base, okay? So the best way to imagine the way that this fragrance spray, and I just kind of did a spritz before this video 10 minutes ago, but the way that this fragrance really kind of makes me feel is just imagine you're in pre-revolutionary France. I know this is an English brand, but we're going to go to France for this one. Pre-revolutionary France. Powdered, just imagine this sort of, imagine Louis the 16th, before he got his head cut off, just decided that he was going to have a proclamation that everything was going to be powdered over. He was going to take the French countryside and just powder it over, right? He loved the smell of his powdered wig, and he just wanted it to be powder everywhere. Like, you ever see the scene from History of the World Part 1 where the French king, Louis the 16th, right before the revolution, is doing a line, and he does the line, and he looks up and he says, "Everything is so green." One of the best movies of all time, by the way. I love Mel Brooks. I'm very happy he's still alive, but I'm going to be very sad when he dies, because he is one of my all-time favorite producers ever. I love Mel Brooks' movies, and there's something very weird about the opening, because there's this green French countryside underneath this just layer and layer and layer of powders. Like, if you're someone who loves powdery fragrances, this is a must sniff. Extremely powdery in the opening, and so you have this weird tarragon note that's just like gasping for breath while being sort of this aristocratic powder bomb is just being dropped on it. You know what I mean? Like Louis the 16th said, "I never want to smell any of my garden or any French greenery anymore. I just want to smell powder everywhere." And all of his people are out there just powdering the countryside. So he doesn't have to smell any greenery. But sometimes a little bit of greenery seeps through underneath all the powders. And like I said, I know this is an English brand, but there's something about the French Revolution and sort of pre-French revolutionary times that this fragrance really just clicks with me. And I know it's sacrilege to kind of compare a French monarch with an English company, as they absolutely despised each other. But there is just something about the French Revolution that just completely just fits perfectly. Like going back to History of the World Part 1, if you watch that movie, did you ever see the part where they roll the red carpet out for the French aristocrats to kind of walk to the palace, and they just roll it directly on top of the peasants, and so the French aristocrats are like stepping on them as they're walking on the red carpet? That is kind of the image of this. They're trying to make it seem so aristocratic and bourgeois and all this, but it just ends up seeming ridiculous, you know, like the men in high heels with the stockings, and they're literally stepping on the peasants on their way, walking on the red carpet. It's very strange, okay? Very, very strange. And the reason that I think it reminds me of this pre-revolutionary France days is, if you just imagine yourself as a French peasant, this is like the perfect image of the way this fragrance makes me feel. Imagine you're a French peasant and you just want to feed your family because you're starving. And so you have this area that is set up for vegetables or whatever it is, you know, plants and vegetables, and you're growing, you're working your ass off. And all of a sudden, here comes the king's entourage, right? And the king's entourage comes, and as the king's entourage is passing you by, all of a sudden, Louis and his entourage decide, you know what? They want to stop and steal all your food. So you're sitting there working your ass off in the sun, right? You can smell, obviously, kind of the underneath greens. You can smell that vegetal. There is, like I said, a bell pepper note. I don't really get a bell pepper accord in here. Maybe there's like a little bit of a chili powder thing in the top. I don't know. But if you just imagine, all of a sudden Louis and his entourage come strolling by, and all you can smell is aristocratic men in sort of tailored, strange suits with the weird frumply ties, and the high heels and the stockings and the powder, right? And I just think that there's this almost imagery of the peasants on one side almost laughing at the aristocrats on the other, and but the aristocrats just don't give a shit. They steal the peasants' food. There's uproar, there's anger, and so that's why I think the French Revolution idea just seeps into my head with this one for some reason. Every time I wear it, I just imagine myself as like a a pre-French Revolutionary bourgeois member, not knowing that everyone's about to get their heads cut off in the White Terror very soon. But in the meantime, you're just like completely ignorant of the fact that all these people are giving you these looks like, we're gonna fucking kill you, dude. You know, there's some of that. There's this strange undercurrent with this one. And the florals definitely give it this bourgeoisie, aristocratic vibe. It's very vintage in feel. Like when most people say vintage, they're going back to like the days of Jacques Guerlain 100 years ago or something like that. This is very, very vintage. This is going back hundreds of years ago. And I think nowadays, most guys, if you just put this under a man's nose today in 2024, most people would say that this leans femme. It's feminine. There's just no getting around it. I watched a review or two where some guy was like, oh, this isn't feminine. I don't know where all that's coming from. Bullshit. This is very feminine, very floral, very powdery. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I also completely disagree about the Parfumo similarities. They usually are very good about their similarities. They have this compared to Roja's Diaghilev, which I completely disagree on. This smells nothing like Diaghilev. And Creation E, which again, completely disagree. Maybe the heliotrope in Creation E and vanilla have a little bit of a comparison to the heliotrope and vanilla in number 1. But other than that, there's no cognac, there's no rum, I don't think there's a comparison with that either. Like I said, there is a pure parfum version that I would love to smell one day. It's discontinued, and God knows how much those go for nowadays. God knows what they went for originally. But it's almost like an Attar pure parfum thing. So, yeah, I mean, the florals make it very, very vintage smelling. Although, if you're a floral lover, like if you're someone who loves florals, if you're a man and you're like, I'm a man, I love florals, this is one to definitely get your nose on, because the powdery aspects of the lily of the valley, the jasmine, the ylang ylang, which can give off that banana-like sort of elastic Rubber band feet floral is very nice. The rose is very nice in here. You know, there's no getting around the huge floral heart. Whenever it really starts to settle down and that weird sort of countryside in Gross that's just kind of powdered over fades away, and you really start to get that floral heart. That's where I think the heliotrope and iris combination make the perfume feel thick and pudgy and, you know, Play-Doh-y in texture. It starts to get that Play-Doh pudginess. That's why I said I think there's people try to compare it to Creation E, but outside of those two notes, there's really no comparison. But heliotrope is a very strong smelling flower. It can overpower a lot of smells, and here it gives it this very Play-Doh-like texture. And especially once you get into the floral heart, you're going to notice it more and more. The powder is always there. The powder, I mean, always there. Powder, powder, powder on this one. And I will say, I think the heliotrope plays a bigger role on the trajectory of the fragrance than the iris does. You know, even though you're smelling iris, it doesn't smell like you're smelling iris. It doesn't smell like you're smelling the powdery aspects of iris. It feels like you're smelling some cosmetic powder note that Patricia Cho created to give off this cosmetic powdery vibe, but it doesn't feel like it's coming from the iris, if that makes sense. And for a most expensive perfume in the world, you know, if you're going to put that on your bottle, you better be using the top-notch ingredients, and it just doesn't smell to me. The iris here doesn't give off this high-class, expensive. I just don't get it. Maybe it's there. It's just maybe it's buried underneath the mounds of powder and powdered wigs and, you know, men walking awkwardly in high heels. But it's there. You know, it's there is a powder note, but I would expect it to be. I would have expected more from that powder note. Let's put it that way. So texture-wise, the fragrance kind of starts to fracture after the first hour or so. And what ends up happening is on the one side, you have this Play-Doh, heliotrope, iris. You know, I've often said heliotrope can almost feel like the mold that they take of one of your teeth at the dentist. It has that, literally, that feel of a mold where it can be malleable. And it feels like you can kind of squish it like Play-Doh, and ambers and vanillas and all that stuff on one side. And on the other side, you have flowers and you have powders. But the flowers and the powders in this fragrance feel like a sprayable perfume, whereas the Play-Doh literally feels like dough. I mean, it feels like there are two parts to this fragrance. On one side, you got the dough, and on the other side, you have the powders and the florals, right? And if you can just imagine a French aristocrat kind of spraying their perfume with a bulb sprayer, of course, you know, keep the imagery of the 1780s French aristocrat in stockings and high heels and powdered wigs. And just, you know, anytime that they spray that bulb sprayer, they kind of shake their head, and powder from the wig just kind of falls into the air and just hangs there. It's almost like suspended in time. So you have perfume molecules in the air, you have powder molecules in the air, and they just kind of blend together. And that's one half of it. And there's something about the powder and the florals that feel very perfumey, like you sprayed a perfume with the bulb sprayer and it's in the air and just hanging. Whereas the other half feels like makeup-y Play-Doh, you know, like the French aristocrat before they go to the Vendée, I don't know, they're going to go powder their face and put some, blush on. And if you can just combine the two in your mind, just imagine you're kind of combining on one side this French bourgeois citizen stepping out of his royal carriage, putting on the equivalent of this thick lotion on his face or a blush, and then spraying the perfume with the powders and the florals on top. Those two textures are basically what Clive Christian #1 smells like to me. And it really does take me back. I mean, you know, that imagery of the French Revolution is just what comes to mind. When I smell this smell, that is what comes to mind. And, you know, they're probably wishing it was something different as an English brand. But honestly, I mean, that is what comes to mind. Powdered wigs, particles in the air. You know, that's pretty much 90% of Clive Christian #1 for me. It does kind of shake and evolve over time. For example, The Play-Doh aspect of it, I would say, kind of turns nuttier as time goes on. And maybe that's the tonka in the base. But there definitely is something about the fragrance that slightly turns spicier. I think that, personally, I think that they overemphasize the spiciness of Clive Christian #1 for men. I think they overemphasize the nutmeg and spices in here. I think that the tonka almost turns nuttier as it dries down, and there's a little bit of spiciness in there. But for the most part, I don't get this huge spice bomb. I get a huge floral powder bomb, if that makes sense. Now, let's talk about price, because how can you talk about the world's most expensive perfume, quote unquote, without talking about price? So if you just go to CliveChristian.com, the US Clive Christian's website, and you're just going to be a baller, you're not going to try to find this discounted because, you know, you are of the bourgeoisie and you want to just buy it, okay? You just want to click buy at retail. Well, 50 mils is $790. So it's like, wow, okay. $790 for this. So if you asked me, what would I pay for this for 50 mils? $100. I'd pay about $100. So let's say it's 8 times overpriced, in my opinion. And so I'll read you the little blurb. It says, Clive Christian's masterpiece #1 is a harmonious fusion of 222 rare and precious ingredients sourced from around the globe, capturing the essence of refined perfumery. This majestic woody amber fragrance opens with a lively pimento and sparkling lime. Okay. Heart that evolves into a base of vetiver and tonka bean. Yeah, I could see a little bit of the vetiver. I mean, you really got to look for it. I think my description in the opening with that French countryside with the grass being covered up by powder, that may be the vetiver playing its role. It says, revealing an exotic floral and spice heart that evolves into a base of vetiver and tonka bean. The crowning touch is a velvety 50-year-old aged sandalwood, adding a signature flourish to this exquisite perfume. Thyme's herbaceous notes are gently toasted beneath golden flames of nutmeg, evoking the spirit of the East while hinting at England's rustic past. Cardamom, nutmeg, pimento, and artemisia oil create a potent elixir that complements citrusy bergamot, lime, Sicilian mandarin, and pink grapefruit notes, giving this fragrance a refreshing heart. A mellow tonka bean base is enriched by the deep, opulent textures of golden amber, sandalwood, and Madagascan vanilla, culminating in a silky alabaster finish, delicately touched by a spritz of musk. #1 truly lives up to its name. Yes, indeed. No, I would say it does not live up to its name. It's just powder bomb. Powder floral bomb is what you have to keep in mind with #1. So, this has been fun, I must admit. This has been fun. And you know what? As much shit as I give this, I don't hate wearing it, is the thing. I don't hate it because it's just so weird. I mean, it's just like 1800, carriages and, just powdered wigs and bourgeoisie and class warfare and guillotines. And that's the other thing about this. There is something about this scent that just evokes this, horror show in the background. And I think it has to do with the countryside being kind of covered up by powder. Almost like you can smell the bullshit, right? It's almost like when you watch the nightly news nowadays, you can just smell the absolute bullshit. Like, does anyone even listen or pay attention or believe any of this shit anymore, right? So that is a little bit of the feeling of #1. And that's a little bit of the fun for me too. Like, I'll give you an example. So obviously the White Terror in Revolutionary France was horrible. They guillotined. I mean, at the time, Robespierre was probably signing, 300-400 death warrants a day. And so the guillotine was just nonstop, right? Nonstop back then. And so there's a very crazy story about Robespierre himself, who, had these Enlightenment ideas and all that shit. But he gave a speech in what is equivalent of their parliament at the time. And he basically said that he was going to bring in more enemies, but he didn't say who it was. So everyone who was there assumed they were on the list. So they decided, well, we got to get rid of this guy Robespierre now, right? So they bring him to the guillotine. They arrest him. Well, first when they try to arrest him, he pulls out a gun. He's never used a gun before. He's only seen how it's supposed to work, and he blows his jaw off. Apparently, not his head. He blows his jaw off. So his jaw is sitting there hanging. They like tie it back to his head, right? And then when they take him to the guillotine, they pull off his bandage. His jaw literally falls off. He gives off this animal screech in horror, and they just cut his head off, and that's the end of it. But there is almost this beautiful French countryside, right? These florals, these beautiful florals, powdered wigs, expensive perfume on the back end of this horror show, right? And it's just crazy. That's what makes this fragrance interesting, is the craziness of it. Like, 50-year-old sandalwood and 222 rare ingredients. And it's just like the craziness of the fragrance is what makes this so interesting. And it just takes me to that French Revolutionary time mentally. I have no clue why. Absolutely no. It just instantly, every time I've worn it, it's done that for me. So, yes, if you can get a deal like I did. So I got all 3 of these in 30 mils for like, I don't remember, $300 or something. It was like 300 something. So for me, that's worth it when they're selling 50 mils for $7.90. But if you look around, you will be able to find deals, but be very careful because Clive Christian is one of those brands that is very regularly faked. Okay, so be very careful who you buy from. You don't want to end up with a fake Clive Christian because you found one for $90 and you're like, oh, it's a deal of a lifetime. Well, it ended up being made in some Chinese sweatshop or something. So anyways, that's my thought on Clive Christian #1. Probably a lot different from the other YouTube reviewers on this one, but that's kind of where I sit on it. If you have any thoughts on it, if you smelled Clive Christian #1 for men, do let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the brand of Clive Christian. We will be having more of these as they are fun for me. So, yes, more to come. And hell of a logo, by the way. Very English, I must say. This is like the Norman Conquest all over again. I mean, look at that. Beautiful. So anyways, that's my thought. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.